everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Today I am going to be doing my August wrap-up. I am aware that it's October, so I should be doing my September wrap-up, but I didn't post for 2 months, so I kind of have to catch up. The first book that I finished in August was Listen to Your Heart by Casey West. This is her most recent release, so I have read every single book that she has put out so far. This book follows a girl whose name I've forgotten. Let me look it up. This book follows a girl called Kate, and talking is not her favorite thing in the world, so she is less than thrilled when she is picked to be one of the co-hosts for the school podcast. Now she has to give advice to anonymous callers, but she actually ends up being pretty good at it until she gets a call from an anonymous guy asking for advice for his unnamed crush. She is pretty sure that the guy calling is the very attractive Diago, who her friend Alana happens to have a crush on, and she's pretty sure that the crush in question is Alana. So Kate starts giving Diago advice on how to win her friend over until Kate starts to develop feelings for Diago herself, which obviously causes a bit of an issue there. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite Casey West book, but I still really enjoyed it. There's not a whole lot I can say about this story except that it's just a really cute contemporary story. One of my favorite things about it was the family dynamic in it. Kate comes from like this really big family and she's got all these cute little cousins. And the thing that I always love about Casey West books is that every single one seems to have some kind of YA trope in it, but somehow she turns it on its head and makes it its own kind of thing. So in this book there's a little bit of a love triangle going on, but it's done in a way where it's between the main character, her best friend, and a guy that they both like, which I've never really seen done before in a YA story, so I really enjoyed how that was done in this book. The next book that I finished in August was Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. This was actually a reread for me. I had read this book years and years ago. As you guys know, I love Alice in Wonderland, but I had kind of forgotten what Through the Looking Glass was really about. Needless to say, I loved this one as well. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I just love the whimsical way that Lewis Carroll wrote this story and just the dialogue between the characters. I just absolutely love it. Then I read the original tale of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. I had never read this book before, but I had heard a lot of things about it, about how it's a super terrifying story. I kind of get that, I kind of don't. It wasn't as like horrifying as I expected it to be. I guess maybe for a book of its time it was probably pretty creepy, but in this day and age it wasn't really, and I did enjoy the way it ended. I don't want to say how it ended because I don't want to give it away for anybody, but I liked how it wrapped up, basically. The next book I read was 5 to 1. This kind of follows an Indian culture in the future where for every 5 boys there is only 1 girl. So when a girl reaches a certain age, these 5 boys have to compete in these different tournaments to try and win her hand in marriage. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. It's a pretty short book, especially considering that it's told from 2 perspectives, and one of the perspectives is told in verse. So overall it's a pretty short story, and I enjoyed it. My only issue with it was that it should have been longer. There wasn't enough character development or world building to really connect with it, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I just kind of wish it would have been a longer story. The next book I read was Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Rowanhorse. This book I am planning to do a full review on, so I don't want to talk about it too much in this video because I don't want to repeat myself, but this is basically a post-apocalyptic urban fantasy. We follow a girl called Maggie who is a monster hunter, and basically, to just sum up my thoughts really quickly without going too much into it, I really enjoyed this book a lot more than I thought I was going to. If you kind of want to hear my thoughts about this as I'm reading it, I did read this for Booktubeathon, as I said, so I will leave a link to my reading vlog for that up in the card in the corner so you can kind of hear me talk about it live. I gushed a lot about it in that video because I just really enjoyed it and it really took me by surprise. And then the last book that I read for Booktubeathon was actually a reread for me, and that is House at the End of the Street by Lily Blake. This is just one of those short little thriller novels. I didn't really want to reread this book and I wasn't planning on rereading it, but towards the end of Booktubeathon I kind of just ran out of time, so I just wanted to pick up something short, and the only thing I really had on hand was this book, so that is what I read. The first time I read this book, which was in 2016, I gave it 4 stars, but this reread I gave it 3 stars. I think that just thrillers in general, or horrors, like when you read them or watch them for a second time, they're not gonna be as good because you already know what's happening. So yeah, I still enjoyed it, but obviously not as much, and I'm not gonna give you a synopsis on this book because, as with most thrillers or horrors, I feel like you should just go into them blind, but I actually really did enjoy this the first time that I read it, so I would recommend picking it up if you just want something short. The next book I read was Remember Me by Sophie Kinsella. This is an adult contemporary romance novel. I've never read a Sophie Kinsella book before, so this was my first one, but I think this is actually a pretty old book. I want to say it came out in like 2007 or something like that, so all of the like technology and stuff used in this book, like the cell phones, were pretty old. But this book, we follow a girl called Lexi, and at the beginning of this novel, she wakes up in the hospital and she does not remember anything from like the last 4 years. So she wakes up and all of a sudden she is rich and she's married to this guy, and all this stuff is happening in her life that she has no idea. So we just follow Lexi as she tries to get her memory back and figure out this new life for herself. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It was okay. It wasn't great. I think the reason I didn't enjoy this book as much as I wanted to was because I didn't get out of it what I thought I was going to. I was hoping there was going to be more of a romance aspect of this book, whereas romance seemed to be a little bit more on the sidelines, and this more was just following Lexi's journey of trying to get her memory back, whereas I went into this wanting a romance and I didn't really get it. So I think that's why I only gave it 3 stars. And then the final book that I read in August, I also plan on doing a separate review video for, so I'm not going to talk about it too much here, but that is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is my first ever Colleen Hoover book. If you don't know, she writes mainly new adult stories, which I'd never really been interested in, but now that I read this one, I am very interested in them because I really enjoyed this book. As of lately, I had realized that I was starting to kind of fall out of love with YA books because I just couldn't connect to the characters as much, whereas in new adult books, which follow kind of older characters like college age students, I can relate to them a lot more, and that's what happened with this book. Again, I'm not going to give a synopsis for this book for 2 reasons. One, because I'm going to go into a little bit more in my full review video, but 2, I feel like this is a book that you need to go in blind because that is what I did, and this book blew my mind. I know Colleen Hoover has a lot of controversy surrounding her stories, and in this book, I honestly can't say that I understood why people hated it so much. I did at first. If you read all the way to the end and if you read the author's note, you understand everything that happened in this book, and it was incredibly moving. I nearly cried at the end, which never happens in books. I'm not a crier when it comes to books, but this one nearly did it for me. So do look forward to my review for this book because I'm going to talk all about my thoughts on it because I have a lot of them. And as far as my rating goes for this book, what I will say is that at first I thought this was just going to be a like dumb romance contemporary story. I was reading this as if I was reading a fan fiction, and for the first half of the story, that's what I got out of it, which is fine. It was like a 2 or 3 star rating, but the second half of this book, it got so heavy, which I was not expecting, and it instantly became like a 5 star, so I ended up giving it a 4 star rating. But I read this in August, it's now October, and I haven't stopped thinking about this book, so I'm thinking about raising my rating to a 5 star. We will have to see when I post my review for this. But yeah, overall, just to end my thoughts on this, I would highly recommend it for everybody to read. Although it is new adult, as I said, so there are some pretty graphic sex scenes in this, so not for younger readers, but everybody else to read. So those were all of the books that I read in August. Leave me a comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and also let me know what your favorite book was that you read in August, if you can even still remember, because it's now October. I'm just very behind in this. But yeah, that is all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!